Hello, and welcome to a Component 3 seminar for national boards. So, I wanted to get started right away because I want to make the best use of your time. So, I'll be sharing a presentation with you throughout that kind of help guide us. And so, I want to make sure that we spend our time wisely because there is a lot to go through. So, this is the Component 3 seminar meeting and is presented by myself. My name is Michonne. And I will be guiding you through just the different things that have to do with component three. But I thought what I want to do first is I wanted to introduce myself. So my name is Michonne. I'm currently an English teacher. I'm in the classroom full time. And then on top of that, I'm a national boards candidate support provider. I don't work for national boards, but that's what we name ourselves in our district. And I work for my district, which means I work with K through 12 educators. Usually we take on about 100 candidates a year. And then I also work with maintenance of certification candidates, which are your renewal candidates. I have been working as a candidate support provider since 2017. So as soon as I heard that I had certified, I was picked up by our district to become a candidate support provider, and I've been doing it ever since. I work for my district, and then I have an online business, which is probably how you met me. If you are interested in anything else that I offer. I will at the end talk about the resources I offer, but also I have tons and tons and tons of free videos on TikTok. If you search up Spiritus Mundi, which is right here in my name, that's my business name. And if you go there, you will find tons and tons of free videos on all components and the process in general. So that is who I am, and I'm excited to be here today. Thank you for purchasing this seminar, and I'm hoping you learn a great deal and feel very confident with component three. So before we get started, I wanted to just go through our objectives. So I really would love for you to calendar important dates and deadlines because that's something you have to keep up with the entire time. We're going to review all the different important elements of national boards and component three. We'll also become familiar with the instructional context sheet and the intro to entry form, as well as instructional planning form and writing about planning. We'll also look at the written commentary, dive into those questions and questions about just the process in general. I try to cover them, even though this is a taped seminar or a recorded seminar. I try to think of all the FAQs that candidates normally ask. And then we're going to make a to-do list today. So get a pen and pencil, pen and or pencil and paper ready so that you can write down a to-do list because there is going to be lots to do when we're talking about component three. So let's get started on that. The first thing I want you to recognize is you need to write down important dates and deadlines that have to do with national boards. So if you go into Google right now and you search first time and returning candidates, you can find the website for national boards, and then you're going to scroll all the way down and there's normally a calendar. In that calendar, you're going to write down the important dates, which includes registration, paying for your components, dropping components, submitting your components, and the component one window. Put all of those dates in your phone. So I'm going to say this a lot. Pause and do that right now, or put it on your to-do list because you absolutely need to keep up with the due dates. If you don't know anything about the national board process, this gives you a good visual of what it's all about. You have four components. Component one is the test, and you'll do that at an assessment center. Component two is all about differentiation in instruction, and usually we'll show that through student work samples and then also written commentary. Component three is all about your teaching practice in your classroom environment, where you show stuff about your engagement, your instruction, and your environment through videos, 10 to 15-minute videos, although I always say they need to be 15 minutes, written commentary and evidence. Finally, component four was kind of like, hey, well, what's left over? And they came up with component four, which is kind of a monster. So you have 7 different forms with evidence, and you have a written commentary. It's all about you being effective and reflective practitioner. But honestly, it covers everything. There's assessment in there. There's professional development. There's student need. There's knowledge of students. There's self-assessment. It's a lot. So I highly recommend my seminar on component four, as well as my seminar on component two, because I do offer all seminars for components 2 through 4. This is another visual that I love. It really helps you wrap your head around all the different components. Once again, component one is 40% of your overall weighted score. It's your computer-based task, which we'll talk about more in a second. Component two is differentiation and instruction, and it's 15%, which requires a 12 to 13-page written commentary with evidence. Component three are the videos I just talked about. You'll have 2 videos, 10 to 15 minutes. You'll have 2 4-page written commentaries. You'll have forms, evidence, and a writing about planning, and that is 30%. And finally, component four, which even though it's a beast, is only 15%, which you're doing a 12-page written commentary. You have 7 different forms that most all require evidence. So the ones people tend to struggle with the most is component four, just because there's so much to it. And then component one is incredibly important because it is 40% of your overall score. Now, they're all important, but I'm trying to point out ones that I see candidates struggle with a little bit more than the other. So this is your total here. You might want to take a picture of this as you move on, just to kind of wrap your head around the entire national boards process. I've also created another visual that I think helps a lot of candidates understand this breakdown. So this is right here, this 40% of total score. This is for component one. You're going to go to a testing center and you're going to take a test that's multiple choice, which is SRI, that selected response. That's 20% of your total score. And in that same test, you most often will have 3 writing tasks. They are called CRE, which are constructed response, and those are each weighted differently at 6.67%. All of that totals your 40% for your component one. And then if you look here on the right, it's kind of what I've already said already. Components 2, 3, and 4 are 15%, 30%, and 15%. So this gives you another visual of those breakdowns and kind of lets you know exactly what the process looks like. So those are all things that you need to consider as you move through this. Okay, how do I find anything? That's half the battle. Now, I have a Padlet for sale that, if you're unfamiliar with Padlets, it's a place where you can put a whole bunch of different resources. So I do have a Padlet that's for sale that has all the resources in one spot so that you don't have to go to the National Board's website and try to find all these things. If you can't find it, this is how you're going to, okay? So if you're not interested in the Padlet, this is how you're going to find all the important information when it comes to national boards. You're going to type in any search engine, first time and returning candidates. Okay. So we're actually going to do that right now just to kind of show you what this looks like, and so that you can feel a little more comfortable when it comes to the national boards, process. So you're going to come here. Once you've done the Google, I mean, I can even start from there if that makes everybody more comfortable. So first time and returning candidates. Okay. It's usually the first thing that pops up. So this is the link you're looking for. Once you click on that, it's going to take you to the page I was just on. And you need to be very familiar with this because this is where you're going to find all your information. So get ready to take some notes right now because this is very important. Right here on this first page, if you scroll down, this was the calendar I'm talking about, okay? This is right now for this date. This is the 26-27 registration window. So I don't know at what point you'll be looking at the seminar, but you will always scroll down and find that calendar, put all of those dates into your phone. Now, the other things you need to make sure you understand where to find are all the directions, and it is a little bit overwhelming and it is a little bit confusing. So watch me. You're going to scroll down. The very first thing you want to find is instructions. You need to do certificate-specific instructions. Well, actually, let's not jump to that. Let's first do general portfolio instructions. You're going to print these out. You're going to read them. You're going to annotate them. These are general portfolio instructions for the entire process, component one through component four. So you definitely need to print, read, and annotate those. And then you also, with the guides, you need to choose the right certificate area. So for example, this isn't as hard for like secondary teachers because if you're secondary and you're ELA, you choose the age group that you want to be with. But if you're a middle childhood generalist, like if you're in the elementary level, you can do middle childhood generalist, you can do literacy. It kind of depends what you feel like you're strongest in. So you need to choose the right certificate area. So definitely do that. So choose the right certificate area. Go down and print, read, and annotate the general portfolio instructions. Then once you've decided what certificate area you are, this is where you're going to find all your instructions and what to do for each of the components. So the first thing you do is you choose what specific area you are. So I looked at the directions. I'm like, I'm English Language Arts. Then I look at my development level. I choose the correct development level. And now here's what the dropdown is. You have to know, you have to read, you have to memorize, honestly, these standards. Now, when I'm talking about standards, I'm not talking about Common Core standards. I'm talking about national board standards. So you need to read or print this out, read these, annotate them. These are your standards, national board standards for your certificate area that you need to know. These component one, component two, component three, component four are zip files with all of the information you need to know for each of the components. So since we're doing component three today, you would click on component three. And then once it's downloaded, you're able to see in a little zip file, you'll be able to see that it has the instructions. Now, once you click on the file, it'll break it down. and it has the forms, and then it has the actual instructions. Okay. So these are the instructions I'm telling you. You also need to, once again, print and read and annotate for your specific content area. So this is really important because it's so hard to find all this stuff, but those are the things that you need to do before you start jumping into writing any forms, writing any written commentary, doing any videos. Make sure you visit all the things I just told you to visit. Okay. Now we're going to go back. That's how you find all that important information. Don't forget, you might want to write that down, but at some point you need to do all of those things. On top of that, you need to know the 5 core propositions. So basically what National Board says is that you need to know 3 things: your standards for your certificate area, National Board standards, the 5 core propositions, and the architecture of accomplished teaching. Because if you know and you're able to do all of these things, you are an accomplished teacher. So get to know these 5 core propositions. We have teachers are committed to students and their learning. Teachers know the subjects they teach and how to teach those subjects to students. Teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning. Teachers think systematically about their practice and learn from their experience. And finally, teachers are members of the learning communities. Now, these are just the 5 core propositions kind of at a glance. This document, what teachers should know and be able to do, is something that you once again need to find on that main website, that main page that I just showed you. So we're going to go back there now to make sure you understand how to do this. Under, there it is, under certification, you need to find 5 core propositions. Once you click on that, it's going to take you to basically a place that you can, if you want to, you can read it online. I like to actually print things and annotate it. So you can read it through this way by clicking on these and going through it. Or you can click what teachers should know and be able to do. And it'll give you the option, if you scroll all the way down, to download the ebook as a PDF. You also need to know this. This is basically walking you through what they think an accomplished teacher does. So remember, I just talked about the 5 core proposition. This actually is 52 pages of what the 5 core propositions are. So once again, before you start this process, you need to print this out, read this, and annotate. Okay. So that's another thing that you need to put on your to-do list. This is what is called the architecture of accomplished teaching. You're going to hear me reference it as AAT, just like the 5 core propositions. You're going to hear me reference it as the 5 CPs because, you know, we're educators. We love acronyms. This is a helix that basically shows you the process of teaching and how it should go. This is what accomplished teachers do. Number 1, first step, you know who your students are. Who are they? Where are they now? What do they need? What order do they need it? Where should they begin? Or where should I begin? Now, what I wanted to show you is in this graphic, the 5 core propositions are linked to the architecture of accomplished teaching. For example, this is step 1 of the architecture of accomplished teaching. Look right down below. We copied and pasted the 5 core proposition. Teachers are committed to students and their learning. See how they relate? Now go to the next step of the helix. Set high and worthwhile goals appropriate for these students at this time in this setting. Once again, that relates to the 5 core proposition number 1. Look at step 3, implements instruction designed to attain those goals. 5 core proposition 2. Teachers know the subjects they teach and how to teach the subjects to students. See how they're linked? Go to 4, evaluate student learning in light of the goals in the instruction. Teachers are responsible for managing and monitoring student learning, which is 5 core proposition 3. Step 5, reflect on student learning, the effectiveness of the instruction design, the particular concerns and issues. Relates to number 4 of the 5 core propositions. You think systematically about your practice and from experience. And then we're going all the way to 6. You set new high and worthwhile goals that are appropriate for these students at this time. Once again, that kind of goes back to 5 core proposition 1 because you know your students where they're at. And then also 5 core proposition number 4. So like, do you see how everything is intertwined and everything is related? We're just trying to show you that these things are all related. So when you're talking about your national board standards, you're talking about the 5 CPs, you're talking about AAT. They all are related, but as you write, you want to show evidence of that. So that's why it's important you understand those 3 things: your standards, the 5 CPs, and the AAT. Take a picture of this. All right, next. I told you this before, but you need to know your standards and you need to be able to reference them throughout your component. So once again, you're going to go into that main page, just like I showed you, use the drop-down menu to choose your area, certificate area, your age level or development level. Once you have done that, you're going to find your standards and you're going to print those out. You're going to print, once again, everything here. I'm an English teacher. We love to read and annotate everything, but it's super important that you do this because you need to know all of these things. So if you're confused, once again, this is the main page. You're going to scroll down. You're going to come right here, choose your area certificate, choose your development level, and then down here, your standards will pop up. Okay. You need to read and annotate these thoroughly. This is like your guiding document. This is your North Star. This is what you're going to study for component 1 for the exam. Once again, lots of pages. So this process is not for someone who doesn't like to read. You definitely need to be able to read and annotate and thoroughly process a lot of information, because your guiding document, your North Star, are basically these standards. So make sure that you, once again, put this on your to-do list, because this is the very first step in understanding what it means to be an accomplished teacher in your particular area. So make sure you do that. Okay. I wanted to do a visual for you when it comes to component 3. So we're now starting getting in the nitty gritty of component 3. When we are thinking about component 3, excuse me, you, in a bigger picture idea, this is what you need to submit in the end. You will have 2 instructional planning forms. Within the instructional planning forms, you will have a 2-page document that talks about writing about planning. Those are questions you'll answer. And then you need 3 pages of evidence. Okay, so let me say that again. You need 2 of these. So within those, you have 1 file that has the form, the writing about planning, and evidence, and you have another file that has the form, the writing about planning, and the 3 pages of evidence. And the reason is you have a video 1 and a video 2. You have to do this for both videos. Then you need 2 instructional context sheets. That's the second thing. 1 for video 1, 1 for video 2. And then you need 1 introduction to entry form, because it covers video 1 and video 2. Then on top of that, you need 2 videos, okay? 10 to 15 minutes, although I say 15 minutes total for sure. We recommend 1 small group and 1 whole group. And that is something that you're going to have to read about within your own content area, because some people can do one-on-ones. And then you have 2 written commentaries, 1 for video 1, 1 for video 2, and those are 4 pages each. So I think this kind of helps breaking it down, component 3 in a nutshell, if you're having a hard time understanding what all the moving parts of component 3. But that's why you, of course, are going to read your instructions for component 3. So after you've done choose your certificate area, after you've done your general portfolio instructions, after you've understood the AAT and the 5 core propositions, you're going to print your component 3 instructions, and you're going to read through those incredibly thoroughly to understand what I just explained to you. When you're going through component 3, your areas of focus are your abilities to engage, the environment that you create within your classroom, and your overall instruction. You have to show evidence of all of these through your forms, through your evidence, through your writing about planning, and through your 4-page written commentary. So as you go through this, think about your engagement, your environment, and your instruction. And anytime you're writing something, you should be writing to one of those 3 things. So always think about that. Here's what I highly recommend. Print out your instructions right now. Okay. Or if you don't have access to a printer, at least bring them up right now. What I would do is, if you can print it out, kind of take time to locate these different sections. There's an overview of the entry. There's portfolio instructions for C3. There's submission at a glance, and there's a scoring rubric. If you've printed these out right now, take tabs and separate this. Okay. So that you can find, where's the overview? Where's the portfolio instructions? Where's the submission at a glance? Where are the rubrics? Because part of this whole process is just being incredibly organized so that you're not incredibly overwhelmed. Okay. If you're organized, it's going to feel less overwhelming. You're still going to feel overwhelmed, but organized equals, less overwhelmed. So keep that in mind. So I want you to scan right now your instructions. If you have them printed out, take a sticky note and put it where the overview is. Then find the instructions and put a sticky note there. Then find submission at a glance, put a sticky note there, and find scoring rubric and put it there. That just gives you a very easy way of tabbing this information and moving quickly. Because when you are overwhelmed, you want to be searching through all the directions to find that. So that's something you absolutely want to do. The other thing I would recommend is, if you need to pause right now, because you're like, I haven't even read C3, I don't even know what's going on, then pause right now and read through the C3 instructions, because I'm going to start getting into the video requirements and everything else. I want to make sure you understand what you need to do within your own component 3 instructions. So pause, read your component 3 instructions, and then come back and let's start getting into all the nitty gritty. Okay, video requirements. You have to have unedited videos. That means 15 minutes straight and no edits, okay? Because this shows real interaction. So you want to show your interactions between you and your students, and you want to show interactions between students and students. You want to make sure both you and your students can be clearly seen and heard. They want to see, like I said, that teacher to student interaction. They want to see that student to student interaction, and they want to see evidence that students are actively engaged. We even recommend muting your video and watching your students, because if they don't even look actively engaged, that's a problem, right? Without even having to hear them. And, if they have earbuds in and they've got their heads down and they're mostly just talking to people and not paying attention to the lesson, yeah, that's not going to be great, right? Because we want to be able to see active engagement. Also, you need to choose different lessons with different teaching strategies. So, for example, one video might be a whole group instruction. And then the other video might be small groups, or the other video might be partners, or it might be individual conferences. Check your certificate area. But for example, in ELA AYA, I might do a whole group Socratic seminar, and then I might do a small group structured academic controversy. And those would be two different videos, two different lessons, two different goals. So kind of think about in your brain what that might be for you. Plan your videos. Plan them around the rubrics. We're going to talk about the rubrics too. You need to show evidence of student engagement, your questioning techniques, discussion among students, discussions with you, how you give feedback, the adjustments you make during the instruction. And really, this goal is to show how you impact student learning, not just with like activities completed, but you walking around and, making sure that you've established a safe environment where kids can take risks, making sure that you're engaging students through different strategies, making sure that your instruction is in alignment with your content area, and that your instruction that you've chosen is helping to move these students forward in their educational journey. So think of all those things. And then also, you are going to record more than once. And I know this is very frustrating for a lot of candidates. They're like, I want to record one time and be done. That's not it. Okay. It's just not it, because you only get 15 minutes. These have to be very well organized, very well planned out. And sometimes that means you're going to do this 5 or 6 times. Okay. With that being said, get your students used to that camera early. I actually film with just my iPhone. I just make sure I'm holding it horizontally, and I have a microphone. And sound is another big issue that I've noticed with a lot of people. Invest in a microphone. Get on Amazon and find a microphone that connects to your phone through Bluetooth. But you will have multiple videos, and get your students used to those cameras and the phone early on. I'm talking August, September. And that will just help them feel a little bit more comfortable, so that when it really is time to film a lesson that you plan on using for component 3, they are used to this. Make sure that you have 2 videos that give you kind of options and, or I guess I should say 2 videos that really capture really strong examples of, student thinking and collaboration and participation and your instruction and your environment. Because these 2 videos, really what you're saying is, hey, here's video 1, 15 minutes, video 2, 15 minutes, that's 30 minutes total. And you're trying to capture everything you do and that you're an accomplished teacher. Think about that in 30 minutes, right? So my point is, these videos they have to be pretty great, right? They have to be great. Not perfect, but they definitely have to be well planned out, well thought out. And you need to be able to capture, like I said, environment instruction and engagement, as well as student to student interaction and teacher to student interaction. Okay. How can we do that? Well, I would always make sure that when I'm videoing, when I'm finished, I would go through this. I have this on one of my Padlets. It is basically a video analysis. And you would ask yourself, what evidence do I have of establishing a safe, fair, equitable, and challenging environment, showing that it's student-centered, showing that I give students the skills to collaborate, they can ask thoughtful questions, they respond respectfully. How do I engage kids? Can I see active engagement? Can I see that I've designed and implemented opportunities for students to engage in self-directed learning? Can the assessor see evidence of teacher activities connected to the goals? Sequencing and structuring is solid. In facilitating that inquiry process, can I see evidence of monitoring, evaluating student learning? This is on my Padlet, okay? I actually have videos for you to watch. It's of me teaching, and you get to use this video analysis to kind of look at my videos and scrutinize them for environment, engagement, and instruction to help you when you're planning your video. And then once you have the video you think you want to use, you're going to go back to this document. You're going to ask yourself these questions on top of, in the general portfolio instructions. I showed you that, like first or second slide. You're going to find the video analysis questions, VAQs, in the general portfolio instructions. And after you have shot your video and you're like, this is it, I think this is the one, you are going to look at those video analysis questions and ask yourself and be honest, can you answer those questions with fidelity? And can you say, yes, I find evidence of these things? If so, that's probably the video you want to use. If not, could you talk about why you have maybe answered no to some of those questions within your written commentary? But if there's a lot of no's, probably not worth using. Now, I also provide feedback on videos. At the end here, I'll give you my email address and you can reach out. It is for a fee, but I do review those videos and I tell you what I observe in environment engagement instruction. I never say, yes, use this or no, don't use this, but I give you enough evidence so you to understand that here's what I see from engagement, environment instruction, and then at the bottom I have concerns. And if your concerns are this long, it's probably a no. So I do provide that. You do have to pay per video, but it is worth it because it does kind of give you a little bit of a better understanding of what an outside person might see in your video. So I'll go over that a little bit later. When you're writing on forms and written commentaries, always think of DAR. This is in the general portfolio instructions. DAR means descriptive writing, analytical writing, and then, of course, reflecting. You have to be very cautious because you have page limits. So those of you like us that are English teachers that want to go on and on and on, you aren't able to do so. So when something asks you to describe, you are only describing, okay? We're not analyzing. Description to me is usually 2 sentences or so, sometimes 3, where analysis usually is a paragraph, and so is reflection. So you need to think about those analysis questions are how and why and what ways, and those reflections will say things like reflect on this or next steps, whereas descriptive will literally be like describe or identify. So be very careful on your wording and your page limits, because those of us who are very wordy, you don't want to come and have a 6-page written commentary and have to cut it down to 4 pages. That is just overwhelming. So always keep that in mind of what is this question asking me to do. If you want more information on DAR writing, go to your general portfolio instructions, and there's a section in there that talks about descriptive, analyzing, and reflective writing. Okay, let's start getting into forms. This is the instructional context sheet. So I have just pointed out a couple of things here that you put in the video number, you put in your candidate ID number. That's where you will find when you log into your National Board's website, you'll be able to find your candidate ID number. Notice it says briefly identify type and school program. I highly recommend just talking about the type of school you work at, the grade subject configuration, and then also discuss the demographics. So you can put FRL in there, IEP, and then race. So you can add that for 1. For 2 is very straightforward. Grades taught 9 through 11. Okay. Age levels, 14 through 18. Courses taught, AP English, honors English, like just be very, very direct here for each of those. Numbers students taught daily 120. Now, my elementary people, that's obviously going to be different for you. Okay, what information about your teaching context do you believe it is important? Now, notice it says to understand this portfolio entry. So don't just add a whole bunch of district mandates and information about the staff and scheduling of classes and available space if it has nothing to do with this portfolio entry. So you know what I say? I say maybe leave this one blank, go through your whole portfolio entry, and then come back to it and answer it later and say, like, what information should I really include here that helps the assessor understand the rest of what I've submitted? So I say you fill out number 3 when you're done with the component. 4 is very simple. Once again, it says identify. You're just putting the number, the ages, the grades of students in the class, and the subject matter. You don't need to go beyond that. And then this one's really important. Number 5, describe the relevant characteristics of this class that influenced your planning, the format, the strategies. And think of who your students are. Only include here what's important for the assessor to know about who your students are that informed the planning of this unit, that informed the chosen format, that informed the strategies for this lesson, because you're going to reference this in the writing about planning in the written commentary. You're going to go back and reference this. So you don't want to just put something in there, just put something in there. You really need to think about, okay, who are my kids socially? Oh, that's why I chose this strategy. Who are my students who need a little bit additional practice? Oh, that's why I have some of these differentiation strategies that I chose. Who are my students academically? That's why I chose this strategy for the lesson. So be very, very specific here because you're going to have to reference it later and you want to make it meaningful. This is the intro to entry form. Remember, I'm going to go back. You need 2 of these because video 1 and video 2. You only need 1 of these because if you look, it says provide a brief overview of the entire entry. So this is going to be like maybe 3 to 4 sentences of just talking about the whole entire entry. Now, number 2 and 3 are very important because you're first going to describe the focus of the video. More importantly, you're going to tell the rationale. And the rationale needs to say, I chose this video because it shows this about my environment or our environment, this about my instruction, this about my ability to engage. And you need to spell that out. Why are we making it harder on the assessor? Spell it out for the assessor. Like, I chose this because it shows this about my environment, this about my engagement, this about my instruction, because that's what they're looking for. So spell it out for them so they don't have to look for it as hard. So you're going to do that for video 1. And you're going to do that for video 2. This takes a pretty big chunk of the form, okay? Because number 1 is brief overview, maybe 3 sentences. 4 seems like a lot. And then 2 and 3 are going to be lengthier because you're going to do the focus. And then the rationale, you need to say environment, instruction, and engagement, okay? Add that to your to-do list. All right, instructional planning form. So this one is a little bit confusing because you will have the planning form, which is this. Then you will include 2 pages for the writing about planning. Okay, I'll show you that in a second. And then you're going to have 3 more pages of evidence. So let's just focus on this planning form first. And by the way, you need this for both videos. So video 1 is what I'm writing down here where it says which video. Candidate ID, we just went over that. Indicate the unit of instruction. Indicate is, think of that verb. You're just indicating. Argumentative writing unit with counterclaims. Okay. Indicate the goals. Now, when you are writing instructional goals for the unit, probably need at least 3 goals. Those goals need to be tied to the national board standards. Okay. I try to use their keywords, their phrases, and their ideas. So if I'm writing about argumentative writing, I need to go into my national board standards, see what they say about writing and the process of writing, and try to use keywords, phrases within those instructional goals. They still need to be my goals. Don't copy and paste from national board standards. But I actually write it out as students will be able to. Okay. You're going to come up with those goals using your national board standards. Then indicate the goals for the lesson. Once again, 2 to 3 goals for the lesson, and those from the lesson need to align to the unit, right? Maybe the goals, maybe my big instructional goal is that for students to be able to write in any mode, specifically argumentative, to voice opinions and perspectives. That might be my overall goal. But then the goal for the lesson might be to, students will be able to formulate effective claims, and students will be able to back their assertions with evidence and commentary. Okay. So remember that these are, whatever my instructional goals are for the lesson, need to be in alignment with my overall goals. Indicate the instructional format is number 4. This is easy. Is small group? Is it whole group? Like, I would put whole group Socratic seminar. Now, I might define Socratic seminar in case someone's not familiar with that, although most of us are. I still might define it. Or if it's like my small group choice, I might say small group format, structured academic controversy. And then I might just define that for them so they understand what the strategy and format I chose was. Describe the materials, short and sweet. Okay. Graphic organize. The materials include graphic organizer with claim, evidence, and reasoning, article on whether school uniforms are pros and cons of it. Like the material thing, you don't need to spend a lot of time. It's description, but you're going to feature some of this stuff also. And then 6, really, there are not a lot of allowable edits. You can't just stop and then go again. In the general portfolio instructions, it tells you what allowable edits are, but it's mostly like emergencies, like, oh, you had a fire drill, or you had a code yellow lockdown or something like that. You really don't want to have any edits in your video. It's really just for emergencies. Okay. So this is the form. Now, this is in your C3 instructions. Remember, I told you have the form and then you have 2 pages of writing about planning. These are the questions in writing about planning. They will all go in the same document. Your submission at a glance will help you understand. That's at the end. I'll show you that later too. It's at the end of your instructions. But these are the questions you have to consider for your writing about planning. So remember how I told you that in the instructional context sheet, it said describe the characteristics of your students? You're revisiting that here. So now you have to think of what those characteristics were, and you have to talk about how you use those characteristics to basically how you use your knowledge of students, their backgrounds, their needs, their abilities, and their interests when you planned this lesson. And how did that knowledge also impact your choice of strategies? And then also, what were the challenges presented by your students? So whatever you put on that form, you have to directly talk about here. Okay. Now, the next thing is, how did the social and physical context? You have to talk about both. What do you know about your kids socially that helped, or excuse me, that influenced your planning? What do you know about your students? My apologies. You'll first talk about the social context. So what do you know about your students socially that basically influenced your planning? And then what do you know about the physical context, like of the layout of the room? So for example, when I do a structured academic controversy and there's so many groups talking at one time, I actually take my kids and we go to another area that's larger just because the sound is so much. And sometimes teachers have to rearrange desks. Sometimes they, like I said, have to move locations. So you can talk about the physical context of the room that also influenced your planning. Okay, what are your long-term instructional goals? So bigger picture ideas. Go to your national board standards. What are the bigger picture ideas for argumentative writing? Okay, plug in your content area, right? I'm talking about ELA because that's my thing. But what are your long-term instructional goals? I go to my national board standards and I think about what are they saying about long-term instructional goals, and I use keywords, phrases, ideas to write those. And then don't forget, you also have to talk about like thematic connections for this class. So if I'm talking a lot about journeys throughout my entire first semester, that's kind of a thematic connection that I maybe want to talk about within how the idea of a journey relates to my long-term instructional goals, right? So maybe like we're studying hero's journey and we're arguing about whether the purpose of trials and tribulations and the hero's journey or something like that. I could talk about those thematic connections, how it's moved kind of across a semester. And then also, why are these goals and any of those things, why are they appropriate for students at this time? And don't just be like, well, argumentative writing is important because kids need to learn how to argue. No, think about how it can serve them in their overall educational journey and beyond, like career and college. How do the instructional goals for this particular lesson fit into the long-term goals? Be very specific, like literally. The instructional goal number one, which is students will be able to fill in the blank, fit into the long-term goal of number two, students will be able to blank, and then show the connection. But don't just say, oh, they relate because there's a crossover with argumentative writing. No, be very direct. Long-term goal relates to long-term goal number one relates to this lesson goal number two, and here's why, right? Spell it out for them. And then remember, and any of the thematic connections. What's your rationale for choosing this instructional format? Why a structured academic controversy? Why a Socratic seminar? Why whole group? Why small group? Why one-on-one conferences? But you need to think about why that's important to meet the goals of this lesson, because someone could choose a whole group over small group to meet the lessons. But why did you choose that format, and why do you think that's the most appropriate one? And then finally, what are your reasons for selecting the materials or the resources you use that you reference? Remember, you reference those on the form. So it goes writing about planning form, then 2 pages for this. Let's move on. Specifically, I wanted to talk more about this idea of kind of writing your objectives and your goals. So if you haven't gone through this before and you haven't really necessarily hit your different components. Writing goals is a huge thing in national boards. And one thing that you want to definitely talk about is the instructional planning form does ask you to write those goals, the unit goals and the lesson goals. So one thing I wanted to point out is use that national board's language. You really want to make sure that when you're writing these goals, you have keywords, phrases, and ideas from the national board standards. So for example, students will be able to write in the argumentative mode to create fluent, connected, relevant writing that engages the audience on a particular stance. That thing that's highlighted there, that piece that's highlighted there, are not necessarily my words. It's keywords and phrases that I borrowed. Next one, lesson goal, is students will be able to write effective claims and counterclaims with a careful balance between considering others' comments and retaining a strong individual voice that expresses their own knowledge and perspectives. Once again, though this part right here is actually from the National Board Standards. So I'm trying to show that things that I do already are directly linked to the lesson goals and unit goals that I do. I'm showing how I'm an accomplished teacher throughout my practices. So when you're writing those objectives and goals, like I said, revisit your National Board Standards. Okay, now we're going to talk about the written commentary. You need 2 of these, video 1 and video 2. First question just asks, how did the pedagogical and instructional decisions you made during the lesson align with your planning? Meaning during that lesson, what kind of came to fruition, really? Like, so if I had planned for structured academic controversy where students were using accountable talk and active listening, and they did, I could talk about that. Before the lesson, I planned for students to use accountable talk and active listening, which is seen throughout the lesson when students are using phrases such as, I agree with, I disagree with. So it's just kind of showing like I planned for this. And then during the lesson, it aligned with that. During the lesson, I plan to monitor student learning by walking around, providing feedback, and using my rubric to help guide students along to propel the conversation forward. And so I would say like I planned for that, and then it aligned with that. I saw it in the lesson. So that was a question that people kind of struggle with. Now, the next thing is, what specific approaches, strategies, techniques, or activities did you use to promote active engagement? This is so important. Don't sleep on this question, okay? It should take quite a bit of space, like half a page to three-fourths a page. You're going to literally say, this is a strategy I chose. This is why it's engaging. And then cite very specific examples of engagement from that video recording. So you might say, I chose a structured academic controversy as a strategy. Okay. Then I talk about why that is engaging. Then I say, for example, during the SAC, you can see students engage, such as fill in the kid's name, Tanner, who at minute 3 minutes and 45 seconds states to his partner, and then you fill in something he said that shows he's engaged, right? Or I say, I use accountable talk to engage my students. For example, okay, I say why it's engaging. Then I say, for example, at 5 minutes and 30 seconds, Sean is seen saying, and I'm showing how he's engaging through using accountable talk. I recommend 3 strategies. Name the strategy, talk about why it engages, give a very in-depth explanation, an example from the video of what a student says that shows they're engaged, okay? That could also look like actively participating. Like if you have a really good person who filmed and the kids are writing down information, they should be showing what the kids are writing down to show that they're actively engaged and going towards the goal. And then you can reference what they wrote in your explanations, okay? But you are citing very specific examples. If you're going to say that your questioning techniques worked to engage, then tell me what questions you asked and what minute it was at. Next, how do you establish safe, fair, equitable, and challenging? That's really difficult. You need to talk about safe first and explain how you created that safe environment. Then you need to talk about fair, how you created a fair environment. Then you need to talk about equitable, and then challenging, right? These need to be separated. Don't you lump them together. Show the assessor you understand the difference between the 4. And fair and equitable is not the same. Fair is what you did for all the students. Equitable is what did you do for some who needed specific support. So think of your students who are on IEPs. Think of your students who are EL. They often need additional supports. That's not offered to everybody, but it's offered to them to level the playing field. Know the difference and write about them separately. Finally, how do you monitor and assess student progress during the lesson? How did this influence your decision-making? Meaning, how are you checking for understanding? How did you walk around and assess whether or not students were working their way towards the goals? And when they weren't, what did you do? How was your feedback provided? Why did you provide it in that manner? So once again, be very specific in regards to answering those questions, okay? Now, one thing to consider is that when you are answering these questions, when they're asking you to cite specific examples, you need to really cite specific examples and make sure that you are being very convincing to the assessor. Now, I have this slide on fair and equitable, but I just wanted to point out the differences because so many people struggle with it. Providing all students the same amount of time on an assignment is fair because all the students get the same amount of time. Now, providing a specific student with additional time to accommodate his needs, especially if they're on an IEP, that is equity because it's a specific student who's getting specific amount of time because of a specific need, okay? If you give very specific students sentence stems when writing their essay, because maybe that student is an English language learner and needs sentence stems in order to write that essay, and you didn't provide it for the other 35, but maybe just for this student, that is equity. Okay, but if I gave the whole entire class, everybody, students, sentence stems during our academic controversy to help with the debate, that is fair. So I'm hoping that's making a little bit of a difference. Kind of look at these. You have standards on equity and diversity. Make sure you read your standards in national boards and understand the difference between fair and equity and the idea of appreciation of diversity. Okay, continue on with written commentary questions. To what extent did you achieve the goals of the lessons? Now, go back and see what goals you wrote. Whatever goals you wrote on the form, you got to stick with here. And you're literally going to say, for goal number 1, students will be able to fill in the blank. 90% of students met this goal. For example, and then give an example from the video, okay? Then you have to talk about what your next steps were. So let's say that goal 1, 90% met, and then goal 2, 100% met. What are you going to do for the 10% that didn't meet that goal? What were your next steps with the students as a result? But this is another one that you have to provide evidence from the video. So when you say 90% met it, and you tell us what the goal was, then go into video and say specifically at minute, 7 minutes and 30 seconds, whomever, Marie is seen fulfilling the goal when she says blah, 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 or when she does blah, blah, blah. Okay. And you need to do that. I would say for the goals, you need to show every single goal, whether it was met or not, by what percent of students, and then the examples that you have. How is your approach to teaching this content and the student's video influenced by the past experience? You're not going to spend a huge amount of time on this because you want to spend a lot of your time where they ask for provide evidence. They only asked evidence for 2 questions. It was the strategy question and it was the did you achieve the lesson goals question. That's where you actually have to give specific evidence from the video. The rest is you don't have a lot of space to do so. So like this one, you're just talking about in your past experience, what happened in the past that influenced your ideas now to approach to teaching this? And then the next one is, what would you do differently? So it's a reflection question. What are you going to do next year with a similar group of students? So you're thinking about, okay, what went well in this lesson? What would I do moving forward? How would I change it? What would I keep kind of the same? And make sure you explain why. So that's the written commentary. So now we have gone over the written commentary. You're going to do that 2 times, once for video 1, once for video 2. No matter what, you need to go back and look at your level 3 and level 4 rubrics. Okay. It's so important because you need to understand the difference between the two. Level 4 wants clear, consistent, and convincing evidence. And level 3 is asking for just clear evidence. Now we are gunning for number 4 because we want a top score. Remember that they're going to look at different components and they're going to use some math there. That's something that you're going to have to dive into also, understanding how each of them is weighted differently, how it's scored, and then how many total points you need to pass. So that's something to look at as level 4 and level 3 and try to understand the difference between the two. And as you're working through your forms and evidence and commentary, stick with 4. So we want to stick with 3 is passing, 4 is better. We want the 4. So think about these rubrics. They're at the end of your directions for C3, but take some time to go through these and annotate them and know the difference between 3 and 4. And when you're writing, make sure you're hitting 4 because 3 is good, but 4 is way better. This is submission at a glance form I was talking about. Super important that when you start this journey, actually look at that submission at a glance. People wait until the end. And I'm like, well, you should have looked at the beginning because it tells you exactly how you're going to format your evidence, your written commentaries, your videos, the response length for each of them, any additional information you need for formatting. So check out submission at a glance. And when you go to submit, you're literally going to title everything it says the way it is written in here. So you're going to title Introduction to Entry Form. And then you're going to have that a PDF. It's only 1 file. And then instructional context sheet. Once again, you're going to title it that. It's a PDF. You get 1 file for that. The videos have to be an MP4, 10 to 15 minutes. I say 15. Instructional planning form, you need 2 files, 1 for video 1, 1 for video 2. Now remember, that's the one that has the writing about planning and the 3 pieces of evidence. Now for evidence, I highly suggest on my Padlet, I have a lesson plan template that you use that would take up 2 pages. And I've made that template based on national board standards. And then you have 1 additional page for student work. Find actual student work from the lesson, provide feedback on it, 5 core propositions. You're showing evidence of student learning and you providing feedback of it. And that's the 3rd page of evidence you would use. So that's 3 pieces of evidence, 2 for the lesson plan template that I have in my Padlet. And the 3rd one is student work that has student actual writing on it and your feedback. Okay, so that's something to think about. And then you need the 2 written commentaries, 2 files, 1 for video 1, 1 for video 2, and that is only 4 pages, not a lot of pages. So these are the resources I was talking about that I have for sale. I have a component 1, 2, 3, and 4 Padlet. They vary in price. If you're interested in that, there's my contact information down there below, motuafi5@gmail.com. I also give feedback on all components, forms, evidence, and written commentary. I highly, highly suggest if you don't have me give feedback, you find somebody to give you feedback, but that person should be someone who is national board certified, has been successfully through that process, obviously, and has experience with giving feedback because being on this end is a little bit different than being on the initial end. You just need to be able to really read and analyze whether or not the candidate has answered all those questions. I also have all these seminars, just like this one. I have a component 2, I have a component 4, and then I have live Zoom sessions if you're interested in that because you'd rather have me live to ask questions and walk you through the process. So I offer all those things. Sale, once again, if you're interested, there's my contact information. You can email me and I'm happy to help you with that. Now, before we go, I wanted to just make sure we all have a very, very solid understanding of where to find all that information. Once again, you're going to go to that main page, first time and returning candidates. And as you scroll down, you're going to have that opportunity to choose your certificate area and your development level. This is where all your directions will come. This is where the standards are. Don't forget about choosing that right certificate area. Don't forget about the general portfolio instructions. Over here in certification, you can find the 5 core propositions. But if you're like, this is so overwhelming trying to find all this stuff, This is my component three Padlet. It has everything in a one-stop shop, one place. So it's a pacing guide that I've created. Here's all the documents from national boards that are just right there at your fingertips. Five core proposition, the architecture of accomplished teaching, videos from national boards. I even have a sign that national boards has that's made for you to say, hey, I'm posting this on my door and nobody can bother me because I need to work on my national boards. I have a brainstorming document. I have videos for you to watch. I have video observation forms for you to use. I have small group discussion ideas. I have three discussion idea resources to help you figure out if you want to do whole group or small group and what that's going to look like as far as strategies. There's my lesson plan template I talked about. I have student goals helping you write those. I have, which is really exciting, I have created a written commentary that was not submitted, but that I think could possibly pass. So what that means is you could read through this. You have got to get out of here, please. You've got to get out of here. Yes, love you. You could use this to kind of help guide you. And sorry, I had a little visitor. You could use this to help guide you through your written commentary. It doesn't mean you're going to pass. It just means it's kind of a mentor text. And on top of that, I have a whole entire zip file of C3 examples of forms and evidence you can also use as mentor text. Now that this was submitted, I'm not allowed to share anything that I submitted that's certified. This is something I just created. Being a teacher for so long, I'm like, okay, if I were to start the process again, what would this look like? And I've created that for you. I've also given you ways to fill out each of the forms. That's what these are with the red writing, giving you examples of what C3 evidence could look like. I mean, there's so many resources here. And it's been incredibly helpful for people who are interested in the national boards process. So if you're interested in that, once again, I highly recommend contacting me. And I'm going to put up my email so that you have that once again. But I hope this session is helpful to you. It's a lot. And I know I talk really fast and there's a lot of questions you might have. That's where those live Zoom sessions might come in really nicely. But also that Padlet resource is going to help a ton. So if you're interested in all that, contact me at motuafi5@gmail.com. And I wish you the best of luck. It is a really rewarding experience to go through this. And even if for some reason you don't certify, it does help you think about all tier one instruction and how to refine your practices. And I think a lot of times we're looking for great professional development. And in a way, this can kind of help you with that. But I do wish you best of luck. If you have any questions or are interested in these resources, reach out. Once again, my name is Michonne and my business is Spiritus Mundi. And thank you so much for joining my seminar today.